It is Wednesday night, East Lansing, Michigan. Come on, look out. Come on in, gather around, gather around, gather around, gather around. It is Wednesday night, East Lansing, Michigan. My name is Jim Comparoni, publisher, SpartanMag.com. Time for Spartan Mag, live on a Wednesday night in East Lansing. Ready to talk some Michigan State basketball, football, recruiting, all kinds of nonsense. Going to have a good time. Give us a like if you appreciate what's going on here. Even if you don't, we'd appreciate a like. Subscribe to the channel. Go to SpartanMag.com. Become a subscriber. Half off, still half off, as we continue to digest the portal season and this Michigan State basketball season. Michigan State, number 7 in the country last night, defeated Minnesota 73-51. We have coverage of that over at SpartanMag.com. Also, the postgame VCast, myself and Paul Konerdijk from Spartan, from the Breslin Center, from the court at Breslin Center. You can find that here on the YouTube channel. Michigan State, 18-2, 13 straight victories. Longest winning streak for Michigan State since 2019 season. That was Cassius Winston's Final Four season. Might have been another Final Four the following year if it had not been uprooted by COVID. Michigan State unbeaten in December, unbeaten in January. The first time, you may have heard, the first time that Tom Izzo has ever coached a team that has gone undefeated in December and January. Season number 30 for Izzo. Now, this year's schedule, not as difficult as most Izzo schedules, so that has something to do with it. But you have to appreciate Michigan State being able to go through what they've done since Maui without stubbing their toe. Everybody else in the Big Ten has been stubbing their toe. Granted, Michigan State's not played many teams in the top half of the Big Ten. They've only played Illinois as a top half team in the Big Ten. Illinois, since then, has really fallen on some hard times. I felt when Illinois lost to Maryland, they were without Ivisic, their center. And I thought Illinois looked like a team that didn't have a common thread fabric to them. A lot of times you'll see a team win a game and they'll call it a program game or a culture game, culture win. That could mean different types of things. Sometimes a program win is when you get over the hump and you get a big victory along the way, like some of those Mark D'Antonio victories over Michigan or Ohio State. Sometimes D'Antonio had a program victory like the one at Minnesota in the cold that enabled Michigan State to make a bowl game, go to the Buffalo Wild Wings Bowl out in Arizona, and that kind of was a springboard toward the following year in 2013 when Michigan State went to a Rose Bowl. And then Michigan State, I think, was beating Indiana to become bowl eligible like in 2018 maybe, and Mark D'Antonio called that a program win, handed out hats, and some people kind of criticized that, but they didn't understand the definition. A program win, there's different types of program wins, like we talked about when Michigan State beat Michigan and Ohio State along the way. Or sometimes it's a program win to keep a bowl streak going. Sometimes it's a program win when you've got a lot of bad things going on and the program just carries everything, stabilizes everything, and carries you to victory. Illinois basketball is lacking that right now. If Ivisic gets hurt, okay, that's difficult. But a team they change personnel like they're changing oil in Champagne sometimes. They got players coming and going each year, and when that happens, that fabric, that cultural program fabric, is not as strong as it is at places like Michigan State right now. And Illinois is lacking that. They've got a lot of talent, but one little thing upsets the apple cart there, and they've got the talent to do a lot of damage in March, but I'm not sure they've got all that intangible fabric at work. Michigan State's got a lot of intangible fabric. Defense, rebounding really well last night, a plus 20 on the boards, I think it was. Izzo said it was the best defensive performance, one of the best he's seen from any of his teams in the first half. Field goal percentage held Minnesota to like 31%, cleared the defensive glass, forced 3 shot clock violations in the first half. Minnesota head coach Ben Johnson said they just took us out of our stuff. He thought that Michigan State was able to feed off the crowd, and he was really impressed with what Michigan State did defensively. So the defense is there. Defense will travel. Will it travel this weekend to the West Coast? Michigan State getting ready to play at USC on Saturday, at UCLA on Tuesday. We'll learn more about this Michigan State team this weekend. Then they come home to play Oregon. Coming back from the West Coast trip is always difficult. We're finding this year across the Big Ten. The good news for Michigan State is when they come back home, they will be playing an Oregon team that has been going back and forth numerous times. So that'll work out well for Michigan State with a schedule that's been very manageable, and they have managed it. And Izzo, one win away from tying Bob Knight on the all-time wins list for Big Ten wins. He surpassed Bob Knight back in 2022 for most wins at a Big Ten school. Total, now we're talking about conference wins, Izzo's at 352. Bobby Knight was 353. Do you remember when it was Bobby Knight and then it became Bob Knight? It was Bobby Knight up until about, 1984, something like that. So Michigan State taking on USC. USC is 12-8, 4-5, and the Big Ten been playing better lately, although they lost to UCLA at home. I don't know if that was home or not, but they lost to UCLA by 6 points on Monday. They had a big win at Nebraska last week. A huge win at Illinois. Claude transfer from Xavier hitting the medium range. Surprised Illinois. And also USC had a loss at home by 15 to Wisconsin on January 18th. A little bit all over the map, like a lot of teams in the Big Ten. Michigan State's the one that's just been steady as she goes. Defense rebounding, the shooting needs to get better. Last night Michigan State played some good defense, but on offense, Michigan State began the game 6 out of 19 from the floor with 5 turnovers. Izzo said he was going to be staying late after the game at the Breslin, like he always does. He was going to be staying there late to try to figure out what to do to get the offense going better. But the offense shot 48% in the second half, 12 out of 25. And that's in the final 28 minutes of the game, Michigan State shot 51.4%. Three-point shooting was a little bit better last night, especially in the first half. Second half, 2 out of 10 from 3. That part remains the missing link between Michigan State going from being a good team to a very good team. We've got the mailbag open tonight. We're going to talk Michigan State football, basketball, and recruiting. I think we're going to have some guests coming in and talk Michigan State basketball. And I think Jason Killop's going to be calling in, too, to talk a little bit Michigan State football recruiting over at the Underground Bunker message board, which is the church of what's happening now for Michigan State sports. It is the daily narrative on Spartan Sports. That's where Michigan State fans, the smart ones, the astute ones from all over the planet, congregate to talk about Michigan State sports and other things like refrigerators and televisions and real estate and travel to various places. Underground Bunker message board over at the Underground Bunker. I invited the maggers, the SpartanMag.com subscribers, the premium members over there. I said, put some questions out there. We will answer them mailbag style. That's what we do here. We've got, 10 or 15 questions, including some from last week that we didn't get to. So we'll be doing that today. Question number 1 from Spartan Spirit from West Palm Beach, Florida. He says, hypothetical exercise for you, Jim. He says, grab an envelope, pen and paper. If you had to put down a prediction on paper, put it in an envelope, seal it, and open it when Michigan State is finished with their basketball season. What are you putting down on paper today in regards to how far the Spartans will go in March? Sweet 16, Elite 8, Final 4? Questions? He's asking. Well, that's a dandy. I'll say this. Michigan State has... like I said last week, shouldn't be any news to anybody. They're number 7 in the country. They've got a coach who's gone to, 8 Final Fours or something like that. Michigan State can go to the Final Four this year. They're capable of doing that. A lot of it depends on the draws and matchups and things like that. But once you get to the Sweet 16 and you go up against somebody like a Kentucky or an Ole Miss or a Florida, some of those teams, Tennessee, St. John's, I don't know how good St. John's, they play good defense. But at some point, Sweet 16, you better be able to make some shots. And defense will travel. Rebounding will be good. But when you get to a Sweet 16 against a team that's been hot, that's the night that you can't afford to go 4 out of 21 from three-point range like Michigan State has done too often. So when they get there, at that point, Trey Holloman, he's capable of going, 3 for 6 from three-point range on a given night. So is Jaden Akins. You are going to need that from those guys on that night, whether it be Sweet 16 against Florida, Elite 8 against Kentucky or whomever. So that's a little bit of a roll of the dice. But I think Michigan State's dangerous in that regard because they do a lot of other things well. And Izzo likes the way they've got everybody committed, everybody buying in. Ben Johnson last night was impressed with what he perceives as Michigan State having a high buy-in factor. He said, in years past, I don't know if they had that, and the truth is they didn't have that. It kind of wavered. But now the leadership is pretty good. Izzo keeps saying, hey, let's see what happens when we lose a couple games, when there's rocky waters. Everybody's all together now, but make sure we don't get fractured. He's saying that, challenging his guys to not listen to some outside forces that might be complaining about playing time or shot attempts. And there is some of that swirling around, and he's kind of backing those people off and also challenging his own players to say, hey, we're going to have some trouble. He's not anticipating that they're going to go 28-2. So when we lose, let's see who's going to be able to get back to work and handle it like an adult. In the program and outside of the program. So Izzo's fired some warning shots in that regard. But when they get to the tournament, Izzo and his staff and the way they handle one-day preps, that'll be an advantage for the second-round game and for the Elite Eight game. For the Sweet 16, things even out a little bit more because both teams have longer to prepare. And when that happens, you got to hit some threes. The stretch four shooting, which we talked about last week, SpartanMag Live at the very end, and I talked about Kohler possibly being a guy that could do that, and last night hit 2 3-pointers in the first half. Talked to Jackson Kohler in the locker room after the game last night. He said he was eager to get back on the court and practice more and more and more of those 3-pointers. Booker's always going to be a street guy. I don't know if he's ever going to round into being a guy that you can really rely on to hit 40% threes like an Adrian Payne or an AJ Granger, people like that. Kohler, I think, is going to be there at some point in his career. Can he do it this year? Can he do it next month and the month after? That's going to be one of the determining factors. As to how far this team can go. Now, Kohler shooting 3-pointers is not going to be a primary thing like it was with AJ Granger or Kenny Goins. Although, with Goins, hit the big one against Duke. That was him, right? And they ran some pick and pop early action with Goins here and there. Joey Hauser, of course, was a go-to first option guy. Not going to be like that, of course. But when you get to a late shot clock situation and you've got Kohler running out to set a ball screen and you do a pick and pop to him in there and the defense is not covering him, can he knock down that 3-pointer at 33%? Of course, you'd like to have him on the offensive glass when other people shoot, but in order to spread out the defense, you need that stretch four in the Michigan State system. Most teams would love to have a stretch four that can shoot. Kohler last night, 2 3-pointers in the first half. Still just a 20% shooter for the year. Not expecting miracles from him. But like I said last night, and like I said last week, there have been Final Four runs when Michigan State has had players that have emerged in March or late February that looked far different than they looked in January. 2009, Draymond Green as a freshman. Allen Anderson was still, as a senior, midway through the season, was a little bit tardy with box outs and other things, but he really dialed in late in the season and made some 3-pointers as a power forward that year, Allen Anderson. So, even Xavier Tillman in the 2019 Final Four run, he was coming off the bench. Then Nick Ward was injured. Tillman goes in, becomes a defensive stopper. Tillman messed around with some perimeter shooting, was it the following year? And then they nixed that idea midway through the season, and he got back to his role. But Kohler, just as a component, you need all those components. You need all those cards working for you. And the perimeter shooting needs to come around. Michigan State is still a highly suspect perimeter shooting team. Last night, Trey Holloman was hot. Kohler was hot for a half with that defense, and you saw what it looked like, 36-16. So right now, what am I writing down? Right now, I'm writing down Elite Eight. A lot of that depends on matchups. Izzo's going to be very good. This team's good. Getting better. And they listen to him, which is good. So I think Final Four is a possibility, and further is a possibility. But you're asking me what my guess is. Last week I might have said, Sweet 16 or something. But let's see a little bit more. I might change it in a couple weeks. But that'd be my prediction. But I could be wrong. It could be better than that. Question number 2, Sherlock from Macomb, Michigan says, and if you've got some ideas and some predictions of your own, throw it over here. We'd love to entertain those. I'm assuming the audio is working pretty good. All right, looks like it is. Question 2, Sherlock from Macomb, Michigan. I don't know if he's from Macomb. He didn't put where he's from. And if you don't put where you're from, people, I'm going to assign you a town. And today, Sherlock, you're from Macomb, Michigan. He says, Michigan State's had some good teams. Hold on a second. Keep an eye on the clock here. Why is that not? All right, Michigan State's had some good teams that could have won it all. And I might want to share this question if we have a guest tonight. Michigan State has had some good teams, says Sherlock, that could have won it all during Tom Izzo's career. He says, I'm thinking of the 2005 team with Allen Anderson and the 2016 team with Denzel Valentine and the 2020 team with Winston and Tillman, which was ended by the COVID situation. Which of these teams do you think was the best, or which would beat the other two? I'm not going to see the 2016 team. The 2016 team was the team that lost to Middle Tennessee State, right? I never loved that team all year. I know they won about 30 games. Miles Bridges was a sophomore, but I didn't think that they had, I was curious about their ability to play defense on a stretch power forward, which the Big Ten did not have that year. And Bridges should have had the ability to do that, but once Michigan State played Middle Tennessee State, and it wasn't Iggy Potts or whatever his name was. He scored some points, but they had a stretch four. I think his name was Townsend. He did a lot of damage, and Michigan State was running power forwards in and out, trying to find someone that could guard him. That's something that they needed to have established during the season, but they didn't really get exposed by it that year because the Big Ten and the schedule didn't have those type of guys. So I never loved that team all year. Bridges would play the three, and a lot of times he would just dribble 2 dribbles into traffic at the baseline and get stopped. Michigan had him well scouted. The team was better when he was at the 4, and he played the 4 in the final minutes of games and did that pretty well. But I never loved that team. Not in terms of affinity, but in terms of trusting that they were all that great. Let's see here. I've got a problem with the charger here going on. I apologize. Anyway, we might pose that question. I've got some thoughts on that. We're going to table that question and maybe come back to it. Question 3, Sparty from Pawleys Island, South Carolina says, hey, Jim, with the recent success of Michigan State, men's and women's basketball, hockey, tennis, and gymnastics, and I'm sure I'm leaving a few out, has there ever been a better time to be a Spartan? Can't think of a time when we've been this good in so many different sports. Thank you, Alan Haller. Who's got it better than us? And no cheating, says Sparty from Pawleys Island, South Carolina. You still need to be good in football, right? So when you say about, has this been an all-time moment for Michigan State fans? No, 1999, when Michigan State was top 10 and, won the Citrus Bowl, finished in the top 10 and went to the Final Four that year. That was pretty strong at that point. D'Antonio and Izzo was at 2009. There's been some other times. And everybody's happy about hockey and women's basketball and gymnastics, but it doesn't really rally and move the needle like football and basketball, right? So there have been other times. Football's got to be part of the equation every time you do something like this. But there's no question that in terms of basketball, men's and women's, and hockey being this good at the same time. What are they combined right now? 56-8. Women's basketball team blew out Michigan on Saturday. That was interesting. Hockey team took 5 out of 6 points from Minnesota. It's all been nice and dandy. And then you got Gabby Steffen. Have you seen Gabby Steffen?
It is. The sticky feet are really contagious. You see one person do it, you just got to get in on the fun.
That's Gabby Steffen, Elgin, Illinois. This was the meet against Michigan a couple weeks ago. All right, there's Olivia Zarmani. This is Delaney Harkness from Leslie, Michigan. She's a senior. And Gabby Steffen coming up on the beam from Elgin, Illinois, right there. They had about 7,000 people there. It was a lot of fun. I was there, had a good time. Michigan State gymnastics. That was quite a good show. Hadn't really seen something like that for Michigan State gymnastics, and a lot of fans showed up, and that was different. And that was fun. As Sparty from Pawleys Island, South Carolina says, when has it ever been like this? With the array of sports in the 60s, Michigan State was great in wrestling, soccer, won national championships. Of course, football and basketball was pretty good. I wasn't around to check that out. But right now it is pretty good. Question number 4, Ernie from Colorado says, "Hi, Jim. I'm not sure how much you've already had a chance to speak with Coach Jonathan Smith this season, since the season ended, but what are some things that he's mentioned or you believe he's learned about Michigan State and or the Big Ten with 1 year under his belt? And do you sense that he's had a 'we're not in Corvallis anymore' moment yet?" The "we're not in Corvallis" stuff. There's been a little bit of that, when he talked about the importance of the line of scrimmage in Big Ten games. I mean, the line of scrimmage is important everywhere, but the physicality of the Big Ten he mentioned was an eye opener. Also, the climate he talked about at the end of the season. The recruiting's been different. They said that they want to be more aggressive. They haven't done a lap around in recruiting this year. Last year, they had a little bit better lay of the land on what needed to be done. So that's been a little bit of an eye-opener. As far as recruiting goes, you can see them getting involved in Georgia now, and I mentioned that last week here on the SpartanMag Live. Georgia's important for Michigan State. Michigan State had some doors that were open during the Tucker administration that were better than they'd ever been in the past, I would say. Got some players out of there, but more importantly, they were really starting to make some headway and make some momentum that could have built upon itself if that train had stayed on the tracks. You saw that Jonathan Smith and Blue Adams and James Adams were down in Georgia this week, reconnecting with some Michigan State people. That's very important. Michigan State's got a chance to do some things down there. The Big Ten brand has never been better in the Southeast than it is right now. I think there's more respect for Big Ten football in the Southeast than any time I can remember in the last 30 years. Because right now there's the SEC and there's the Big Ten. Everybody agrees that there's a power two of the power four. And now, the Big Ten has done really well in the postseason the last couple of years. And those things, people used to, all the way down to the high school level, players, fans, coaches in the Southeast would kind of sneer at the Big Ten. Well, that's not real football. Well, now there's no denying it that the Big Ten is strong football. Michigan State might not be at the very top of the table in the Big Ten, but it's right there. So can Michigan State go down to Georgia and beat the Bulldogs, beat the Crimson Tide, beat LSU for recruit? Probably not happening unless you want to spend crazy money and spend too much money on one player and not have enough for other areas. But can you go down there if you're Michigan State and compete and beat, South Carolina, Mississippi State, Kentucky for recruits? And you might think that's no big deal. That is a big deal. And I think Michigan State's in position to be able to do that. You got to get in early. You got to get in there aggressively, and then maybe even stair-step your way up toward going after some of the bigger fish. That's way down the road. But you could, if you evaluate well and you develop players well, you have a good culture, you can do just fine by going down there and recruiting kind of at that second-tier SEC level, plus doing well close to home, plus doing well in other areas, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, get into Chicagoland a little bit, and then some of your contacts in the West. You put it all together with an 18 to 20-man class, you can do some damage, and a couple from Georgia here and there would certainly help. So when you talk about what he's learned about since he's been at Michigan State, I think he's learning as he goes. I don't think he's a closed-minded guy. I think he's a very open-minded guy. I know he's a very open-minded guy. So he's getting a lay of the land, figuring out the landscape, the climate on everything, figuratively, and making adjustments. And I think you can see that on the recruiting trail this winter. You're seeing them develop as a staff. And if Jason's going to come on, I think Jason Killop's going to come on a little bit later. We'll talk a little bit about those things. Let me check my messages here, see if I've heard from him. Okay. No, he's going to call him. Let's see what else. Oh, I have to send a number. Trying to get I started this with my phone because the callers come in through my phone, and it's not charged. So I was trying to charge it with an auxiliary thing here, and that kind of was working and kind of not working. But anyway, we expect to hear from, I think, Nils Deco here pretty soon. Talk some Michigan State basketball. Let's go over here and look at the comments area, see what kind of traffic we got. We got Eric M. calling in from Roswell, Georgia. Speaking of the Peach State, Matthew Latham says, "Evening comp." That's MSU Stu over at the underground bunker message board. He used to oversee the Mun hockey board back in the old days. He's got to be really excited with Michigan State in hockey right now. What are they, number 2 in the country now? Number 3? Number 2? Did pretty well with a real great series against Minnesota last weekend. Desert Sparty saying, hey, comp. Clark Merrier says, happy Hump Day. Kenneth from Downriver, so that's your starting 5. Eric M., Matthew Latham, Desert Sparty, Clark Merrier, and Kenneth. Appreciate all y'all. Let's see what we got here question-wise. Question 5, Ben from Spring Arbor, Michigan. Thanks, Ben, for including your town. What penalties do you foresee for Michigan football getting from the NCAA? He says. And if you, Jim Comparoni, were the sole arbiter for the NCAA, what penalty would you levy on Michigan? All right, question A. What penalties do I foresee for Michigan? Michigan's doing everything possible to hang on to that national championship, and they will lie, cheat, and steal to do it, if they have to do it, as if they haven't already done some of that. It's very important to them. They want to win the press conference, win this thing on paper, and all those things, and they're trying hard. And indications are that they feel good that that's going to happen. So that leads me to believe that some of the things we'd been hearing about in terms of laptop espionage, for lack of a better word, or maybe that is the right word, I'm not hearing anything more about that coming out. I don't know if that's part of it at all. I think it's all Connor Stallion stuff right now. So the laptop stuff, breaches and laptop security and the use of it. You know, like the Alabama players were talking about before Michigan played Alabama 2 years ago. They said they stopped using their laptops because Michigan, they found or they heard, had been breaking into laptops, so they didn't trust it, so they didn't use their own laptops. That's not me talking. That's an Alabama player. So they weren't making that up out of thin air. And we did hear some of those things around here that they felt the same way. So maybe they didn't prove any of that. If that's proven, like I said, what Alabama players said, if Michigan was getting into laptops, other teams' laptops, and stealing practice information, then you cannot recognize them as a national champion. But from what I'm hearing, I don't think that's part of these findings that are coming out. And again, I'm not like throwing out a theory. Alabama player last year before the semifinals said that they stopped using laptops for that reason. So if I were the sole arbiter, what penalty would I levy on Michigan? I can't answer that right now because I don't know what's been proven. So I don't know. Question 6, Green Dog from Livonia, Michigan says, if Coach Izzo were to retire next year or the next year or two, who do you think would be the odds-on favorite to replace him? Is Sadie Washington a legitimate possibility? Sadie Washington's a possibility to become a head coach somewhere, someday, maybe even Michigan State. You're talking in the next year or two, like next year or two. It would most likely, that would be an unforeseen happening, and it depends on at what point in the calendar it happens. For instance, when Dean Smith retired, it was right before the season ended, and he pushed in, I forgot the guy's name that ended up replacing him. Also, Jim Calhoun, he retired right before the season ended, so Kevin Ollie moved in, won a national title, and then some things happened. Krzyzewski was able to name his own successor. Of course, Heathcote named Izzo as his successor. Gene Cady named Painter as his successor. Izzo would like to do that, I would imagine, at some point. Who's on his staff at that point? It's going to be a big part of it. His former assistants, what are they doing out around the country? That'll be a part of it. Are there others without Michigan State ties that the decision makers would look at? Alan Haller is the decision maker. He's done a real great job hiring coaches. If this were to happen in April and the athletic department had 5 months to, or a couple months to pick up before the next season started, I think there's more of a chance it might go national. If Izzo's picking it and it happened abruptly, like next year, like unexpectedly, it'd be someone on staff. And I would think right now, I think Doug Wojcik would get a strong look, I think, from Izzo and the rest. Because, Wojcik's done a lot in terms of recruiting, getting some big-time recruits, some big-time evaluations, big-time with the X's and O's. As far as Michigan State, as far as Izzo's former coaches go, Wojcik has the best winning percentage elsewhere at Charleston and Tulsa. So would he be able to take the baton here, keep it rolling? I don't know. But he would. I think that you're asking the next year, like if this happened next year abruptly, it happened like late in the summer, and you didn't have a lot of time to put things together, I think that could happen. And it might just happen organically anyway if Izzo makes a push that way. But I don't know. Izzo's not. I don't think he talks to anybody about any of this. But Wojcik's a guy that's done some coaching. He's great with X's and O's. Evaluation, he's the guy that went out and got Cohen Carr. Evaluation of the portal, he's the guy that went out and got Zapawa. Who are some of the others? But yeah, Sadi's going to be right in there someday, someplace, maybe here, I don't know. But there's no like clear-cut favorite, right? There's no John Shire who's right there, who hasn't coached yet, who might be a little younger and on the way up. There's no one quite like that. There's no Tom Izzo like Judd Heathcote had. There's no Matt Painter who's been out there that's gone to the Sweet 16 with, Southern Illinois or wherever it was that he coached before. So there's no like slam dunk obvious successor. So my guess is not any better than anyone else's. But you asked if he were to retire like next year, like abruptly. It would depend on the calendar, and the person I just mentioned would probably get a look. Question 7, Dr. Fraser Crane from Seattle. Comp, can you explain your comment in the thread about the portal that said Saeed Khalif was being Saeed Khalif? Given he was one of the very few, maybe the only guy that Tucker fired during his tenure, what was the issue there? I can't remember the firing. There were some logistical things, I think. It wasn't necessarily a performance thing, but Saeed being Saeed, I just think that he was. Remember when Tucker used to talk about, he would say that he knew what a national championship team looked like in terms of size. So there was a certain size that they were going after, and in a lot of regards, they would go and get a person at a certain size, whether they could play or not. It's the way it turned out. And I think they were in love with 4-stars or former 4-stars that may have been third string at Auburn or Tennessee or other places. He's a 4-star, we'll bring him in. Saeed was kind of along those lines. Saeed was very interested in recruiting rankings. And there used to be a term, I remember talking to the late, great Brad Lawing, who was a defensive line coach for Saban and then for Bobby Williams. And when they were recruiting at Michigan State at the time, he says, we don't recruit out of a book. I know some people that have recruited out of a book, and it'll get you in trouble. Now, that was 25 years ago. Talking about recruiting out of a book, it's like, let's look at who's ranked. Let's try to get in this guy and this guy and that guy without doing a lot of evaluation. I think Tucker turned more and more over to Saeed Khalif, and more, the best way I can describe it is I think they did a lot of recruiting out of a book. Bringing in a lot of 4-star recruits. Someone like Tumise Adeleye comes in. Was a 4-star, committed to Ohio State. Where was he? Where did he play high school ball? New Jersey. They didn't have a high school season as a senior because of COVID. Goes to Texas A&M, redshirts, then plays 2 games at A&M and kind of has an ankle situation. Then he transfers to Michigan State, and that was like a big red letter transfer. I mean, why was he a 4-star? Was there any junior film on him? I saw him against Sam Houston State in game 2 for Texas A&M. There was no film of him his redshirt year. They went out and got him. Yeah, but he was a 4-star. Tumise did what he could, tried, but I mean, how much evaluation really went in there other than seeing a 4-star next to his name? I wonder about that. So Saeed had a lot of communication with people here and there, and it's just Saeed being Saeed. So they gave it a try and didn't work out. And I don't know, Saeed can call me and we can talk about it if he wants to. Second, you also mentioned that Tucker was less engaged in recruiting his last year. Can you elaborate? What was he not doing that he should have been? What was he doing instead? I think that sort of insight might be helpful for those of us who are a little nervous about Smith's first year and the trajectory of the program because we may not have understood how much of a mess he walked into. Just the recruiting. Tucker was really hands-on with recruiting in the beginning. Remember, COVID was going on, and he had those assistant coaches hitting the phones hard and a lot of evaluation. You only had time to evaluate, offers. Brought in a recruiting class, worked hard. Those were the Zoom babies, as he called them. They worked hard. Turns out that Zoom class was not very good. Not very many productive players from that class, but they worked hard at it. And then when they could get out and recruit boots on the ground the following year, I thought they were aggressive. I thought Tucker had a lot of energy initially. Did pretty well. And the next year they brought in a lot of 4-stars in the summer. Did not have that good of a season in the fall. Did not finish with the 4-stars and really lacked a lot of plan B plans coming down the stretch. around that time, from that point forward, seemed to me that Tucker was doing less and less in terms of, that boots on the ground evaluation and really, beating the bushes and having that initial energy that he had when he was first hired. That was kind of going away. And, speaking with people in the program in terms of just a lot of things were going on in Tucker in terms of evaluating recruits. I think that he would. I think that if he were truthful, and I've not spoken with him since the end of that game against whoever it was they played in game 2, Richmond or whoever it was. I think if he were truthful, I think he would say that he did not put as much time into recruiting as he did the first couple of years. He had a lot of things going on, and we know what some of those ended up happening, but that's about it. Hey, Nils, you're on the air. You are live. Can you hear me, Nils Deco? Did I lose him? I think I just lost the call in general. Sorry about that. We had Nils trying to call him to talk some basketball and lost him. I'm not sure why. All right, so question number 8. These are from last week. Todd from Frozen Duck Lake. He says, hello, Jim. Any 2025 football recruits besides the one that MSU is still trying to land? The one being Bryson Williams from Orchard Lake, St. Mary's. And I guess I've not heard anything about him lately, but I've not heard anything negative there. Do you see any 2026 football recruits committing anytime soon? If so, who does? Well, Michigan State had the tight end commitment from New Lexington, Ohio. Joey Caudill committed last week. He's a physical quarterback in high school. A team that went to the Division IV regional semifinals. Physical type quarterback at about 6'5". More physically put together right now than Matt Sokol was. Matt Sokol being the last tight end that Michigan State signed, who was a high school quarterback. Sokol was a good athlete and looked good in the t-shirt camps at tight end, but needed to put on some mass to become a blocking tight end. And Sokol, it took a while, but eventually became a guy that had like 8 or 9 catches as a senior. And he's been bouncing around the NFL on practice teams, and he was with the Pittsburgh Steelers practice team this past year. He's never broken into a game in the NFL, I don't think, but just being on practice teams in the NFL, no small task. So Sokol continues to, do his thing. He never quite turned the corner to become the impact tight end that I thought Sokol could be. So I'm comparing him to Sokol because Sokol was a high school quarterback. Caudill is a high school quarterback, plays defense, safety. He kind of edge linebacker sometimes. Edge linebacker hits hard on defense. A little more physically put together than Sokol was. But in terms of what he does as a pass catcher, I've not seen a lot, because he's playing quarterback on the film. Maybe this summer at the t-shirt camps we'll see more of it. Kind of an interesting commitment there for Michigan State to start off, because Michigan State's in on some good tight ends. That was an interesting one. They must really like him for a lot of reasons to go ahead and make him the first commitment. But in terms of others, we've talked about Kade Kaufman. Kade Kaufman, talked about him a little bit last week, and I talked about him on the Underground Bunker message board. And watching him, his film over at East Kentwood, there's a team that's about 500 that played a really tough schedule. Put up some points, and quick feet, quick release, throw on the run, gets his feet set, arm. Let's see if I got some film. I think I might have some film of him. Here we go. I'll make sure I'm spelling this right. And I'll do a little narration here when we get a chance. All right, let's see. Let me rewind this a little bit. Some of this stuff's pretty impressive. All right, here, stepping up in the pocket, getting his feet set, launching that thing. Just a quick feet here. When I said it reminds me of Sam Levitt a little bit, it's things like that. Leo Hannon is the same way with the quick feet. Zone read keep. Makes a guy miss. Acceleration right there reminds me of Levitt or a little bit of Brian Lewerke. And Lewerke was MVP of 2 bowl games for Michigan State, the only player in school history to do that. School's all-time leader in total offense. So don't sneeze at Lewerke. All right, that one, right hash. What do we have here? We've got zone. It's kind of into the cover 2 hole a little bit, but he makes the read, steps up. Watch a little flip here. Steps up, flip, touch. And he's not looping that thing in there. The ball's not, it's to his hands, but it's not like, he's not like throwing a moonshot in there. He's got a little window in there and he gets it in there on time. What do we have here? Again, just a little flick. You're not necessarily seeing I'm not seeing him throw like the 60-yarders, and I don't doubt that he can do that, but that's just a little flick here. Flick. That's about 40 yards in the air. 2 cameras there. Thanks to the video from the D-Zone on that one. Good website. Quickness. Scramble to throw, not scramble to run. He's scrambling up, keeps his eyes downfield. All right, so he escapes the pocket, steps up, keeps his eyes downfield, and the guy right in the logo right there is coming open. A quick flick, and he's not open by very much. Scramble to throw. Right now, boom. And I don't know what he sees here between here and the time when he throws it, because look at the logo where the guy is. The guy's trailing him in man-to-man a little bit, but he decides to throw it, and the way he can get it set, get his feet set, and throw that thing accurately. All right. Some zip accuracy there. There's one where there's a left there against Rockford, I think it is, where it's a left hash outside the numbers against cover 3. I'm still not sure how he got it there that quickly. All right, so he's getting into his throw here before the receiver gets into his break. So he sees number 3, the defensive back, bailing here, and he knows this guy's going to throw an out route. And the ball's already on its way. So the processing is pretty good here and accurate. Right hash, sprint out, feet set, deep, about 45 yards, no, about 55 yards in the air there. Just on a quick flip with his inertia going backwards, getting some late pressure. Getting late pressure off the front foot a little bit. And it's not like he's loading up to throw this thing. He doesn't have to do like he's not throwing his whole body into this thing. Just flicks it. Interesting. Right hash, play action, flick. Made that one work. Right hash. Okay, number 4. Number 4 is going to come open in zone coverage again. A little crossing route. Gets it over the linebacker. He's open, but hits him in stride. Sprint out right. A little curl, a little sit down, snag type of thing. So watch him throwing on the run. So Ole Miss and Iowa State have offered now. Michigan State's offered. Michigan State was the first one in. Good evaluation by Michigan State. Zone read keeper here. All right, this is the one. All right, you got these Ohio State, Michigan high school hash marks, which are very wide. He's way over on the left hash. He's going to throw this one, I think, outside of the right numbers. I think this is against Rockford. That corner is sinking, but he's not giving him that big of a cushion. And he runs a comeback. And the ball's there already. How's that ball get there that quick? You're throwing, see where the quarterback is? Way over on the hash? And the receiver did not have, it wasn't that big of a cushion. I rewound this a bunch of times to say, like, how did the ball get there that quick? Ball's just released. This is like, it's like AI. It's like the guy runs, comeback, ball is there. This is bizarre to me. from the left hash to outside the numbers. Like this video, you can't quite see him make the throw, and you kind of lose the ball, but there he is throwing it. I don't really see where the ball is, and he doesn't have that much of a cushion to work with, but that ball arrives now. Making it work, but you don't see people attempt this throw. And this video is not as clear as others I've seen. The ball gets there so quickly. It's just zip. All right, you can kind of see the end of the motion here. Because I'm still... All right, he just released it. So I'll let it play right now to see how long it takes the ball to get there. It's there now. So it's not, I guess maybe it's not 100 miles an hour, but the arm... They're just things these are uncommon. All right, play action. Again, quick release there on that one. It's a junior highlight film, so he gets some pressure here off the edge and gets his feet set. He's going to throw it to number 16. See number 16 crossing the 30-yard line right now? That's who he's going to go to. He's, to himself, he sees enough of a window there, under pressure, sets his feet. Now I guess he's kind of open, but flick. This is pretty good stuff, people. Scramble to throw. Finds him. Deep along the sideline here. So what does he see here? Is that scramble to throw? Sorry if I'm boring anybody. He's going to throw down the right hash to the left sideline. Again, high school hash. This might have been... All right, so he's going to throw. So he likes the matchup right now. He's even, he's leaving. He's got a half step. He's throwing right now. Ends up being about 30 yards in the air, plus from the right hash. And watch his arm motion here, the arm circle. Flick. Down the sideline. In the bucket. And it's not like one throw in the whole highlight reel. There's a few of them like this. So I'll be interested to see him this summer in the t-shirt camps. Although a lot of those things, a lot of the rankings, there's a lot of preconceived notions on a lot of those things going in. I'm not sure who he threw to there, but again, it's on the run. Got the impromptu scramble, elongated throw, good athlete. At the 50-yard line, you got number 7 there putting a hand up. He sees him, scramble to throw, on the run. How many yards is this? 25, 35, about 40 yards in the air or so. Kade Kaufman, Michigan State recruiting him. Jason Killop earlier this week put in a, what do you call it? A prediction that he thinks he's going to end up at Michigan State. It'd be a good one for Michigan State. Former Michigan State quarterback Ryan Van Dyke has been working with him, and he's really excited about him. And like I said, Ole Miss offers. They're not just offering anybody right now, but Michigan State, this guy out there in West Michigan, there's an RPO read that they're getting in. So in my opinion, this is good for Michigan State. I don't know. I mean, those guys are professionals. They're experts. I'm not. I'm just a sports writer who drinks coffee and eats donuts. But talking around, there's some people impressed with this guy, and I'm impressed that Michigan State got in on him early. Pulled the plug, made a quick offer. This RPO making a read. Overhang is bailing, so taking what the defense gives right there. Play action. Throws a guy open to the back shoulder on that last one. Another RPO. A little bit behind on the throw there. This is kind of the quick game portion. I don't know what kind of snap that was, but he worked with it. What's with this snap here? We got to work on our centers here. Whoa. But if he gets it and gets rid of it, short window, sprint out, no problem throwing on the run, especially to his right. Quick release, quick decisions. So you've probably seen enough. Anyway, that is Kade Kaufman. Really intriguing football prospect for Michigan State. East Kentwood High School is going to be. He's junior right now, is going to be a senior next fall. Had a good season this year. Michigan State likes him. Ole Miss is recruiting him. Iowa State's recruiting him. You're not going to see him in any recruiting rankings, but in my opinion, he's one of the top 3 players in the state of Michigan. He's the top quarterback. And if you're starting a team, I'd rather have a quarterback who has a chance than a 5'9" wide receiver. Because the receivers are impactful. You saw what Nick Marsh did. You saw what Jeremiah Smith did at Ohio State. Those guys are different. Looks like Nils has tried to call, but it's not working. J Truth 33 says, great time in camp traveling for work, so joining you from Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. Good to have J Truth here. Raymond Sebastian says, SpartanMag is the best MSU channel, period. You just got a new Spartan Magger football prediction next year. 8-4, 10-2 is mine. Appreciate that. Appreciate having you as a new Spartan Magger. We appreciate having those people. Having all of you. My phone's got a mind of its own right now. Holy crap. Raymond Sebastian, great to have you with us. We appreciate you becoming a news magger. We'd love to have more of you come over and become a SpartanMag.com subscriber. JJ McKay from the Keweenaw says, good evening, everyone. Finally caught a Spartan Mag live. It's been a while. It's good to have you here. JJ McKay, Desert Sparty. Maryland up 4 on Wisconsin with 9 minutes to go. I look forward to watching that game later tonight, rewinding that one. 9-0 run for Maryland. Maryland's impressing me with their way they're using their bigs and the guard, Gillespie. They got an interesting mix right now. JJ McKay. George Page. It's great to hear from George Page, former guitar player and keyboard player for Surrender Dorothy, which is one of the top 25 East Lansing bands of all time. Calls aren't working. Very frustrated about that. JJ McKay says, just finished listening to the Tom Izzo show. Yeah, I made sure not to overlap with the Tom Izzo show. George Page says, very impressed with the improvement of this team and the culture. George Page says, strength in numbers. JJ McKay says, this team is amazing to watch. They're playing so selfless and playing great defense. Ben Cheese says, hello from Allegan, Michigan. Ben Cheese says, I think Carr is an NBA player. You can't teach that type of athleticism. And what I like about Carr is, we saw it last night, shot clock was down along the left baseline. One dribble, pull up, 15-footer, hit that shot. I saw him hit that in practice a couple times. I saw him take that shot and miss that shot against somebody, maybe the Washington game. And I was like, that takes him from pretty good to very good. Because with the way he can elevate, no one's going to stop and go up and contest that shot. If he gets really good at the in-between jumper, which is something Miles Bridges, I think, should have worked out at Michigan State, and never saw much with his ability to shoot and elevate. The medium range for Bridges, I think, should have been something that was more of a weapon for him that never became one. Cohen Carr, the shot release was not good when he came to Michigan State. It's become better, and that's showing itself at the free throw line. So now, and the ball handling is better, the power dribble, body control to go straight up. Really tough shot to stop if he starts adding that to what he does, especially at the end of a shot clock situation. A lot of times Michigan State runs screen roll replace when he's at the 4 and nobody's getting out to shoot, to cover him. So he doesn't really have the freedom on the screen roll replace to go ahead and shoot 3-pointers. He'll shoot 3-pointers from the corner here and there. Shot clock's down if he's wide open. But when they run screen roll replace to him as a 4 and he's uncovered, usually he'll put it on the deck and go to the rim. A lot of times with really productive results. But the other choice there is a couple power dribbles into the lane, elevate, 12-footer, 15-footer. We saw that last night. That's the part that makes him an NBA player. Benchy says, I think Carr's an NBA player. You can't teach that type of athleticism. You're right. You cannot teach that type of athleticism. Not only the vertical, but his foot speed to cover the ground. The alley-oop dunk that he finished last night, go back and watch that and watch him just racehorse past people in the open court. That speed and then the elevation, then the finish. Yes, NBA tools, working on the medium range jumper. And as it gets older, taking it back out for more range shooting because you're going to need that in the NBA. But the medium range and playing defense. The defense he played against Ace Bailey, I'm sure that there were a lot of NBA scouts watching that game because they're always watching Bailey. But Carr and his NBA potential, I think, increased in the last few days, especially with his defense against Bailey. Everybody knew he could play defense like that because of all that athleticism. Just needed to figure things out, learn more, film study of the upcoming opponent, getting into the playbook, and the way he played defense on Bailey, getting out on him. Bailey was not interested in trying to shoot over him. So Carr got out there and was enough to discourage the spot shooting over him, but was off enough that Bailey didn't feel like he could beat him off the dribble. I mean, he really got into him. And last night against Minnesota, Dawson Garcia started to get hot in the second half against Kohler and against Cooper. With about 6 minutes to go, Michigan State put Cohen Carr on him for the first time. Cohen Carr did not guard Garcia the first time Michigan State played at Minnesota. I was curious to see if Michigan State was going to do that against Minnesota this time. And they did late in the game after Garcia got hot in the second half. And Garcia tried to post him up 2 or 3 times. Didn't really get the ball down low down there. I would have liked to have seen what would have happened if Garcia had gotten him on the block, because Carr's got all kinds of strength and athleticism, but he's still only about 6'5", 6'5 and a half, 6'6". Brandon Dawson was maybe listed at 6'7", 6'8". Whatever they're listed as, Dawson was a couple inches taller, stronger, and could handle himself down low on the block. I would think better than Carr, but we've not seen Carr get posted up yet. So whereas Dawson could guard anyone from a 6'9" to a 6'5", 6'4", he could switch on to a point guard if he needed to. Carr, excuse me. Carr's a little bit more naturally inclined to guard a 3-4 rather than a 5, and more he can guard a 2 and a 1 more easily than Dawson could. So they're not exactly the same type of defenders. And Michigan State would love to have a Brandon Dawson type of defender, of course. Would love to have a Xavier Tillman type of defender. They don't quite have that. And to go all the way, at some point you're going to need a guy that's going to be able to guard a guy who's uncommon. And Carr coming along on defense, that'll help him for the NBA days. I do not disagree with you about the athleticism and him being a future NBA guy. Someone's going to want him. Let's work with that guy. Someone's going to want to do that. If you're a Michigan State fan, you're hoping not too soon. J.J. McKay from the Keweenaw says, coming from the top of Michigan here, Keweenaw County. It's good to have J.J. McKay. He says he will be once he gets his three-point jumper more consistent. J.J. McKay says he's shown amazing improvement. Desert Sparty says, I agree with Elite 8 as of today. Elite 8, J.J. McKay says, depends on seeding. J.J. McKay says, do the Ernie Harwell to them. Do the Ernie Harwell. I don't know what that means. What that means. Can I make that bigger? I should make that bigger. Sorry about that. J Truth 33 says Carr definitely should be an NBA player. Already he does things no one else in the court can do. Next year, if he gets a consistent proven jumper, it's lights out. I agree. So does Desert Sparty. So does JJ McKay. Desert Sparty says 2020 team, in my opinion. Let's get back to that question because I wanted to ask Nils about it. Let's go back and talk about that. Nils Deco, formerly from The Horn in Austin, Texas. Radio station in Texas. The question is from Sherlock from Macomb, Michigan. He said, once again, it says comp. Michigan State's had some good teams that could have won it all during Coach Izzo's career. I'm thinking of the 2005 team with Allen Anderson, the 2016 team with Denzel Valentine, and the 2020 team with Winston and Tillman. Which of these do you think was the best? Now, you're talking about 2020, the COVID team, because the Winston Tillman team that made the Final Four was 2019. So the way you phrase it, you're talking about the 2020 team, which never played. What do we have here? Desert Sparty says the 2020 team. I would agree with that because Cassius Winston had been so good in 2019. 2020 he had the tragedy and was battling back from that. And just that year of experience from the Final Four. And Xavier Tillman, what he did in 2019, guarding Zion Williamson. And that's what you need. You need to have that guy that can guard a Zion Williamson. Not that there's a lot of Zion Williamsons in college basketball, but at some point you need to throw that trump card on that mismatch 4. Andre Hudson could do it. I don't know if he could guard Zion Williamson, but Xavier Tillman was an NBA player and nobody knew it at the time. And he could do one thing really well, and that's play defense. He could rebound and shot well enough. the combination of Tillman and Winston and how close they were on and off the court, the synergy they had, the fact that they went to the Final Four in 2019, that 2020 team at Michigan State would have had a real shot to win it all. The 2005 team beating Kentucky and Duke in the Sweet 16 and the round of 8, real nice run. Allen Anderson, severe sprain ankle against Kentucky in the Elite Eight, and couldn't play against North Carolina. Problem is that's a very good North Carolina team. Took on an Illinois team that had been undefeated for much of the year. Those were the two kingpin programs going to that Final Four. If Allen Anderson had been healthy, I think there was a chance that Michigan State could have caught a very, very good national championship North Carolina team, looking past them to Illinois. Michigan State, I think, was leading.
Call from
Jason Killop.
To accept, press 1. To send a voicemail.
All right, we got Jason Killop. Jason, you're on the air. I'm going to finish a statement about basketball here real quickly. Talking about the 2005 Allen Anderson team. Allen Anderson was a power forward. He was an NBA player, team MVP. People didn't realize that he was an NBA player at the time nationally. And I think Michigan State, they led North Carolina at halftime of that game. Michigan State really was very good in transition that year. They had strength in numbers. They did some pressing. North Carolina was a team under Roy Williams. They loved to go up and down, blitz, counter break, and all those things. Michigan State played Carolina's style, and I think they could have done it better than North Carolina did if they had Anderson. I would have loved to have seen that game play out. That could have been one of the all-time great MSU basketball moments if Michigan State had been able to play that game full strength and upset North Carolina that night. I think it was in St. Louis. But of those teams, I think the 2020 team, I'm still trying to think who would win between 2005 at full strength or 2020 at full strength. The 2020 team, Paul Davis was in there. Neitzel as a freshman against Cassius Winston as a senior. Chris Hill coming off the bench, Torbert coming off the bench. I don't know. I'd have to put it all on paper. I'm leaning toward 2020, but I don't know for sure. Jason, are you with us? Jason Killop, recruiting anchor, SpartanMag.com. Is that you? Can you hear me?
Yep. Can you hear me?
Yes. We had Nils trying to call in earlier, and it just wasn't working for him for some reason. But we got you on the line. We're happy to have you. And great job covering Michigan State football and recruiting and all these things. I was talking earlier about the commitment of Joey Caudell from New Lexington, Ohio. Talked about him for a moment. We also ran some video of Kade Kaufman. Earlier this week, you dropped a prediction that you think Kaufman will end up at Michigan State. Am I right about that? Was that your prediction?
Yes.
What do we call these predictions at On3, by the way? What are they called?
RPM,
RPM.
Recruiting prediction machine.
There we go. And you feel pretty good about that prediction still? What are you hearing something there, or just kind of a confluence of smoke and things, or what's going on there? I think it's a big one. I think he's an excellent quarterback prospect. Just ran some film. Reminds me of Sam Levitt. I think he's dynamite.
Yeah, Michigan State has done a really good job recruiting him, being the first offer and continuing that up. They had him on campus for a visit by himself, just a lone trip in December, and he was back at the junior day on January 19th. Obviously, Ole Miss and Iowa State, along with Cincinnati and a couple other schools, have jumped in the mix with offers of their own. And I think that as of now, he's going to take a little bit more time and make sure he explores the options. But so I don't see a commitment coming within the next couple of days or anything like that. But I think just down the line, Michigan State has positioned themselves really well. He's got a super strong relationship with Lindgren, and he's now growing a relationship with John Boyer, Michigan State newly hired quarterbacks coach. So with those two relationships, and he also trains with former Michigan State quarterback Ryan Van Dyke. And one of the things that he was telling me is that he just really values his coaches and family opinion on his decision, and Van Dyke would definitely sign off on Michigan State, and he knows that there's a lot of familiarity there as well. So just with all the pieces, I think Michigan State will be in a good position to maybe land Kaufman in the spring if they continue to push hard for him, which it seems like they will.
Yeah. If it were, in my opinion, I think he's one of the top three players in the state of Michigan. I think it's Kaufman, and I think it's the two offensive linemen, Patrick and the kid from Davison who's going to Notre Dame. Now, I've not seen everybody, so I'll right now that's kind of the way I look at it, and partly because the position you play. If you're playing quarterback, I mean, very important position, right? And there's plenty of quarterbacks that are good and talented, but don't quite get a chance to become the man. I mean, Tom Brady didn't even become the man at Michigan. He was behind Drew Henson. Ryan Van Dyke was a very good one, had some injuries, but he happened to be at Michigan State at a time when Jeff Smoker was there. Keith Nickel, I think, still could have been an NFL talent and might have been an NFL talent at quarterback, but he was at the same program with Sam Bradford at Oklahoma and then Kirk Cousins with Michigan State. If he'd gone somewhere else, he might still be in the NFL. I think Nickel was that good. So you can be a good quarterback and you don't quite get the opportunity. But the important thing if you're a football program is you want to recruit a competition, you want to recruit a pool, and a guy like Kade Kaufman, you want a guy like that in your pool. And you think he's got quick feet, quick release, quick brain, all of it. I want to see some full games. I want to see the incompletions. A lot of people can put together nice highlight reels, and his is extensive, and he does some things other people don't attempt, and he's excellent. But I want to see some of the incompletions. I want to see some of the things that I want to see. I want to see how many incompletions there are, and I want to see some full games, which I never saw with Leo Hannon this year. He reminds me of Leo Hannon. Hannon's got some quick feet, and he does some creative things with arm angles and so forth. I think they're similar, and I think if you watch both of those guys, I would say Lindgren, I think he has a type. I think he has a quarterback type, and Kade Kaufman out there in West Michigan, under the radar, is a very interesting prospect. And if you're starting a college football program, who do you want? You want some quarterbacks, right? Well, there's one close to home that's got a lot of skills and talent. Ole Miss wants him offered. Iowa State offers. That guy to me is one of the top 3 players in the state of Michigan, if maybe number 1. Okay, no one's got him in the top 20 right now, I don't think. So Jason, I don't say things like this very often, but he's quarterback. Quarterbacks are kind of important in this sport, and I think Kaufman's pretty. I think Kaufman's pretty good. Coaches on the road. You've been keeping us up to date with that over at SpartanMag.com Underground Bunker message board. We've got a thread there called Coaches on the Road, and Jason brings information and insight from there, from social media. Michigan State coaches out on the road. What are some of the things on the road that have caught your eye here this week or earlier in January? What you seen any trends out there in Michigan State on the road right now?
Well, right now they're all over the map, and I find that interesting with some of the guys that they had offered earlier on in the recruiting cycle. And with so many offers going out in the 2026 class and during the fall, some of them got overlooked with just the 2025 recruiting news and stuff like that. And now these coaches are circling back, and we're starting to see some of those guys become priorities that with those offers earlier in the fall. One of the guys, Edward Whitting of Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Mm-hmm. Michigan State offered him in the fall, and this month Jonathan Smith went out to visit him, and then Wozniak visited him again earlier this week. So he got 2 visits from the Michigan State staff, and that's a guy Michigan State already. We mentioned Joey Cowdle in their tight end class, so they can be pretty selective with what they want to add with him and with the second tight end in their class, and that's a guy that looks like they're targeting. And it's interesting, Michigan State recruiting out in South Dakota. Obviously, this coaching staff has a lot of connections out west. I don't recall too many recruits from South Dakota so far in their tenure at Michigan State being targets, but that's an interesting area of the country where they're out there, and Jonathan Smith's out there, boots on the ground, and that Edward Whiting guy, he picked up an offer from Alabama this week, so his recruitment's picking up pretty heavily as well. So it's going to be interesting to see if they can get a visit from him in the spring.
Michigan State's been in on some interesting tight ends in this 2026 cycle already. There's Jack Janda from Detroit Catholic Central, correct? And Landon Myrie from Cincinnati Princeton, who's got offers from Oregon, Florida, Wisconsin, Washington, number 22 player in Ohio. He was at Michigan State's junior day, I think January 19th. I think Wozniak was visiting along with Jim Mahalchik, Michigan State offensive line coach, and Jonathan Smith, head coach. They visited Preston Frizel, Toledo Catholic Central.
He also visited for the junior day as well. Frizel did.
Yeah, so Michigan State's in on some tight ends. Interesting that they would go ahead and take Caudell. They must really love him. Caudell, like I said earlier, mostly quarterback film at New Lexington, Ohio. But Michigan State, it's not like Michigan State's probably is running pretty well with a lot of these tight ends. Like you said, only room for 2. The kid from South Dakota, Alabama, just offered. We're just talking about one position right here, but it's already some interesting war room decisions going on there. Would you agree?
Yeah, and then high school teammate of Joey Cowdell, his tight end target, Braden Fogel, has an offer from Michigan State, and he was a guy Wozniak had visited at his school as well. So that's another Midwest option there. And so I'm assuming that they have a priority list with those guys, and then between the top few, it could be first come, first serve for that final spot if some of these Midwest guys were wanting to jump in the fold.
Going back to early January, we're seeing Michigan State go and visit, touching base in the high schools in the state of Michigan, some of the power schools in the state of Michigan, and also Ohio. They said they wanted to make Ohio a priority. We are, correct me if I'm wrong, but we are seeing that this recruiting cycle, junior recruiting in January, not only with Caudill, but Michigan State touching base. You mentioned the tight end from Cincinnati Princeton. Also, a photo came out on social media. Joe Rossi, Jonathan Smith in Ironton, Ohio, visiting Ironton High School. Head coach Trevin Pendleton, walk-on fullback who caught a 19-yard touchdown pass. I think it was 19 yards in the Rose Bowl, January 1st, 2014. Really a great walk-on story. Trevin Pendleton, really an undertold story, the things he did at Michigan State, head coach down there in Ohio. I don't know if he's got any players this year, but Rossi and Smith going down there, that's down, I think that's way down there, like in the foothills of the Appalachians, like across from West Virginia. That's where Pendleton's from. So Rossi and Smith down there touching base in a lot of corners of Ohio, including that head coach Spartan who's down there. Do you know off the top of your head if Ironton has got a prospect right now, or is that just kind of like doing your due diligence as a recruiting staff?
I believe I want to say they had a receiver that signed with Notre Dame in the cycle before, and then they had somebody committed Power 5 for this class coming up, but they had already been committed to a school. I'd have to double check on this, the names.
Sure.
Who that would have been, but nobody that Michigan State had been super active with recently that we know of.
Right. But it makes sense because this is how you recruit. Even when a coach doesn't have a player, you still go visit and you touch base. And that's how D'Antonio did it, believed in it. And a lot of coaches have done it that way. You have your coaches you go to see. If you have days that you can get out in January and you're in the area, you touch base. And then somewhere along the line, some of these coaches call you up and they say, hey, dude, I don't have anyone this year, but if you see that kid at Groveport named Le'Veon Bell, go check that guy. We played against him. The guy's great. Nobody's recruiting him. You know what I mean? This is how recruiting works. When you can get in on, sometimes those little, the networking like that can put you over the top when you're visiting schools that don't have players. And we're seeing some of that, and I thought that was interesting to see Smith and Rossi, a couple of new Spartan coaches down there with Trevin Pendleton. That was a really interesting photo on social media. January 29th, also, Blue Adams had an in-home visit with Devontae Anderson, 3-star guy. Not ranked, the good solid 3-star, number 101 in Florida, offers from Florida, Auburn, Kansas, Minnesota, down there, doing some networking down there. Michigan State's coaches down in Georgia. Something that I said last week in the podcast, Michigan State I thought they needed to do, take the next step as they go through the second lap, this second recruiting cycle. Blue Adams and James Adams, Jonathan Smith down there. They also met with some key Michigan State supporters. Malik Spencer's father, Block Spencer. I did a feature on him a couple years ago when Malik committed to Michigan State. Big-time record executive. Curtis Daniel, former Spartan, big-time entertainment executive. He's a big wheel in Georgia. Former Spartan dog from the early 90s, Perlis era. Those guys want to help Michigan State. And you saw a photo, social media, Smith, Adams, and Adams down there with those guys. Tucker had some good things going with Georgia, and it became derailed after Tucker left. And I give Jonathan Smith credit for going down there, meeting those people, getting his ear to the ground, finding out, what kind of potential energy Michigan State has in various pockets around the country. And everybody knows that Georgia has great high school talent. And Michigan State's got has some resources down there, and he's plugging into them and he's listening. And I'm hearing some good things about that. So, and while they were down there, they checked in on Blake Stewart, safety from Atlanta Woodward Academy, 4-star recruit, number 301 in the country in the On3 recruiting industry rankings, number 35 in Georgia. And, Blake Stewart put that photo out on social media. I don't know if Michigan State can go in there and wrestle for a 4-star in Georgia, but in time, I think Michigan State's got the potential to do that if they become a strong team in the Big Ten. In the meantime, Michigan State going down there and plugging in Georgia, and I think that's one of several indications that I'm seeing on the recruiting trail here during evaluation periods in January where Michigan State has a little better lay of the land and is gaining traction, gaining momentum in terms of the overall recruiting operation. Are you sensing that too, that the operation, it just has a little more horsepower to it than it did 12 months ago? Would you agree with that? Are you sensing that, or am I just imagining things?
No, I agree with that for sure. And especially, I think the coaches being able to go on do in-home visits this cycle is a big thing too, as well, where kids are posting a lot of pictures with the coaches as they come through, rather than a lot of times in the past they would kind of just go under the radar. But now the coaches can go in home and have in-home visits at the home, inside the living rooms with these parents and kids and stuff, and that's been broadcast on social media a lot more as well. And one thing we mentioned on the show last time I was on about coaches on the road was a prospect named Kelsey DeRiso, where Michigan State became the first offer for him out of Fayetteville, Georgia.
Yeah.
Since then, he's picked up offers from Georgia Tech, Kentucky, Mississippi State, Louisville, USF, and some others. So he picked up quite a few offers, and Jonathan Smith stopped in, saw him, and Coach James Adams and Blue Adams stopped in and saw him as well when they were making those rounds in Georgia. And he's talking about visiting in the spring. So that's one of the guys that we talked about at the time, how important it can be to be the first offer for a guy, especially outside of your region like that, and how fast now he's picked up almost 10 offers since then, and he's going to keep considering Michigan State because they were first.
Exactly. And we talked about that before. I mean, Michigan State's chances of going down there and getting in on someone like Kelsey DeRiso after the other offers came in hurts the chances. But Michigan State getting in first, that's how it's done. I've seen Michigan State coaches do it here for years and years. Some do it well, some don't. But for it to work, that's the way it has to work. You can't be playing catch up in Ohio, maybe a little bit in Ohio, but in Georgia, you're not going to reel someone in if you're playing catch up. You got to be first. And if your evaluation over the course of time proves to be good and you're good at it, others will offer after you offer. But when you're first, it means something. And as Michigan State tries to build, you need to utilize those chips. You don't have the recruiting power to come in late. Like Izzo can do, because he's been doing it for years, been winning for years. He can do that, but Michigan State does not have that ability. That's what makes evaluation so important. Also, what else was going on? I wanted to talk to you about a few other things. Joe Rossi's been out earlier this week. I think it was today. They offered Angel Luciano, 6'3" linebackers. You're seeing Rossi mobilizing to go after some of these linebackers. That guy's 6'3" linebacker from Steelton High Spire, Pennsylvania, and that guy's got offers from Maryland, Pittsburgh, Syracuse, Minnesota. That's a Pennsylvania guy, and Rossi's a Pennsylvania guy. Michigan State's offered also. I don't know when Michigan State offered, if they offered first or last or more recently, but you could maybe get in there if Maryland and Pittsburgh and Syracuse and Minnesota have already offered. You can come in and bat second and maybe beat out some of those programs. A little different than things that are going on down south. Also, you've kept an eye on the recruitment of Eli Bickle. Is it Bickle or Bickel from North Branch, Michigan? Bickle, I think it is.
Bickle, I believe it's Bickle.
Yeah, I think. Okay, Machuk Mahalchik, I think, saw him play basketball this weekend at Almont, and Eli scored 20 points that night. Almont, which is like north of the Macomb area at the base of the thumb, kind of. On the 27th, Mahalchik, Jonathan Smith, and Keith Bonifaz went and visited Eli Bickle. Bickle, offensive lineman, top 15 guy in the state of Michigan. What's the latest with him? What are you hearing with him?
He's similar. I put in a prediction for Bickle as well as at the same time as Kaufman, and it's a similar situation in my opinion, where I think Michigan State has just done a great job recruiting them so far and giving them a lot to think about the possibility of making an early decision. And Bickle has taken a couple visits to Michigan State since the season ended. He was on campus in December as well. And then he was on campus for the January 19th Junior Day. Obviously, he's got his basketball season right now, like you just mentioned. He's going to be back to Michigan State in the spring, and I could see them possibly closing things down with him. Cincinnati and Northwestern have both offered. maybe he goes out and takes some visits there and he might pick up some new offers in the spring as well. But I could see him closing things down kind of early, and Michigan State would be the obvious pick in my opinion.
All right, so Michigan State also, you had an interesting report about Marcelo Vitti, defensive back from Dearborn Divine Child, 6 feet 190. Excellent speed on this guy. Committed to Iowa on December 1st. I think On3 has him ranked the number 4 recruit in the state of Michigan. Offers from Michigan, Penn State, Tennessee, Auburn, Wisconsin. 4-star, number 346 in the country. Joe Rossi and James Adams visited him, I think, on Monday of this week. So Michigan State getting in on him. As you reported, Michigan State re-offered. But Marcelo Vitti is a guy, all kinds of speed at 6 feet 190. Has an extra gear that you see like on a kickoff return, extra gear, and he plays offense also, plays defensive back as a safety. When he got loose on an offensive play that was out the gate, you see that he has an extra gear that he kicks into. His initial burst is good, change of direction is pretty good. Reminds me a little bit of Dylan Tatum. Tatum had excellent speed, good offensive player. Tatum on defense as a senior was still new to the position, and I mentioned that he would need to become a guy with a little more physicality and pop. And when he was a senior in high school, Tatum, who's an excellent guy, saw him in the basketball game last night, as a matter of fact. Tatum, I thought, had a long way to go as a 4-star athletic ball skill running back, converting to DB later in his high school career. And Tatum really surprised me how quickly he was able to make the transition to play defensive back at the high school level with plenty of physicality. Because he didn't show it in high school, but at that time he didn't know what he didn't know. Got to college, has been a quick study. And I feel good for Tatum because Tatum, I think, redshirted last year. He's got 2 years left. Program guy. I think he's got a chance to have an impact on and be an impactful person as the program grows. So Vitti reminds me of Tatum in some respects, in some ways. He's committed to Iowa. You spoke with him earlier this week. Article at SpartanMag.com. Dearborn Divine Child. What can you tell us about Vitti? And do you have any gut feelings on that? And what's next with his recruitment?
Yeah, when the hiring of James Adams first happened, I messaged him a couple weeks ago and just asked him for, because I knew that Adams had recruited him to Wake Forest. At the time, he mentioned that he is still locked in with Iowa, but Coach Adams coming to Michigan State could change things, is what he said. Then a couple weeks later, when they come out to the school, he said he really enjoyed talking to them. Sounds like they're in the talks of possibly a spring visit, which would be the next step in Michigan State trying to flip him. I don't think it'll be easy. He has a great relationship with Phil Parker, and he mentions just the consistency of him in Iowa is a big drawing factor and one of the main reasons why he committed there. He really, really liked Michigan State back when Coach Harlan Barnett was recruiting him, and he mentioned that, and that just when Barnett left, things just weren't the same. So now with Adams in the fold, they can maybe turn that vibe back around. And but he admits that he grew up a Michigan State fan and rooting for the program. So visit in the spring could go a long way.
It's interesting to hear some of these people talking about growing up Michigan State fans. You mentioned Vitti, and also like Connor Moore, the offensive tackle that transferred in from Montana State from the Toledo area. You know, these are the residuals of the Mark D'Antonio era. You know, there have been some Michigan State fans in the past, but we're seeing guys that now are 18, 19, 20 years old who during their formative years 10 years ago when Michigan State was really rolling, you're seeing some of that wash ashore. And it's interesting if Michigan State's going to be able to make a run at flipping Vitti. And who knows what Iowa's going to look like heading into next fall, and what Michigan State's going to look like. That's an interesting one to keep an eye on. That's a good athlete right there. I don't know if you know much about Favor Aki, running back, 5'11", 190.
Real quick on what you were just saying there.
Yeah.
Vitti's not the only recruit. He mentioned D'Antonio when I was talking to him, and that's in the article as well. And so is offensive lineman Gregory Patrick, and some of his Patrick is a legacy recruit with his father Joe Patrick playing for the program. So
yeah,
he grew up watching that. And I've heard multiple recruits in the 2026 class, mainly in-state recruits, mention that they themselves would like to see the Michigan State program go back to the D'Antonio days, is how they put it.
Wow. And that's good. That's what a program is all about. That's what historical strength is all about. And Michigan State's got some of that to work with, and Jonathan Smith's going to work to try to tap into that. Favor Aki, running back, Delaware, Ohio, Montgomery High School. 4-star running back, 5'11", 190, ranked the number 9 player in Ohio. Offers from Michigan State, Pittsburgh, West Virginia, Penn State, LSU, NC State, Miami, Iowa, Maryland, Purdue, Indiana. No Buckeyes, though, I don't think. And this is another area where Michigan State or some program can really get some secret sauce going. If you go into Ohio and you get some of the good players that the Buckeyes aren't offering, there's some good ones. Ohio State cannot offer all of them. They don't have room for all of them. And there are going to be some Connor Cooks and some Le'Veon Bells that get away every year. And whoever recruits number 2 in the state of Ohio has always been a top 25 program. In recent years, that's been Kentucky. Prior to that, it was D'Antonio and Michigan State. I can remember times when O'Brien was at Boston College. They had a really good run, and he was doing really well in the Cincinnati area. O'Brien at Boston College, Glenn Mason in Minnesota did really well on the offensive side of the ball in Ohio. West Virginia, when they've been good over the years, it's been when they've recruited well in Ohio. And each one of those programs at different times in the last 30 years has been the number 2 recruiter in Ohio. Michigan, they go off and on a little bit in Ohio. Back in the Schembechler days, they really went to battle in the state of Ohio. They, sometimes they prioritize Ohio, sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Michigan, of course, has the power to go in there and do really well in Ohio, but they'll go elsewhere. If you're Michigan State, you're happy if Ohio State is recruiting more nationally and leaving more of these guys on the tree. And I don't know if Ohio State's going to offer or recruit Favor Aki. I don't know if you've looked into him much yet, but I thought it was interesting that on January 20th, a week and a half ago, Jonathan Smith was there. Keith Bonifaz was there. They visited this young man, running back from Ohio, number 9 player in the Buckeye State. Michigan State going into Ohio, knocking on some doors, Jason. You there?
Yeah, he visited. Yep. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
He visited Michigan State in the fall for a game, and then he was supposed to come to the Michigan State January 19th junior day, but he couldn't make it on the last day because of a ride problem. But he visited Iowa State in January, and there was a lot of buzz off of his visit there that he may commit to the Cyclones, but he did not. So we'll see how that goes or how that progresses into the spring. And I'm sure Michigan State will look to try to get him back on campus in the spring to make up for the junior day visit and have him up for spring practice, I'm sure. He seems very interested in Michigan State. They probably are in the top 3 or 4. I don't think they're the leader. It sounds like Iowa State's in a good spot with him right now, but if they keep pushing through the spring, you can see how that recruitment progresses.
And he's never been to Michigan State's campus, right?
He came to a game in the fall.
Yeah, okay, you just said that. All right.
I believe it was the Ohio State game.
Okay. All right, so also before I let you go, Gregory Patrick, tremendous offensive line prospect, Portage Northern High School. Back on January 8th, Jim Mahalchik and Brian Lindgren visited. They also visited him a few days ago. You've spoken with Gregory Patrick a little bit. What's the latest there? Who does Michigan State have to beat with him? Is it Notre Dame still?
Yeah, in Michigan. He scheduled an official visit to Michigan for the summer already, his only official visit so far. And he visited Michigan earlier this month, his only visit so far in January. So I think the Wolverines are gaining a little bit of momentum heading towards the spring. Michigan State's right in there, and Notre Dame, like you mentioned. Those 3 schools, I think, are the main 3, and I'm sure he'll take official visits to all 3. In the summer, and it sounds like he wants to have a decision before his senior season. So we'll see how that plays out. I'm sure he'll be on campus for a spring practice visit as well. He basically visited Michigan State each chance that he's been able to, which is promising for the Spartans. And right now he's got his basketball season going on, which will wrap up in February, I believe. So it'll make it easier for him to get out on spring trips as well.
All right. And Michigan State, junior day was, I think, January 19th. You had some coverage of that at SpartanMag.com. Anything new or any lasting thoughts from junior day that you were able to gather or come away with as you look back on it? Anything interesting happen junior day 19th, who they had, and maybe some of the observations or some of the what some of those recruits came away with, what they mentioned to you coming out of junior day? Anything interesting there?
Yeah, just in general, overall, I think always the college basketball games always get some of the best visit reactions for the junior day events. It's definitely an awesome event and an atmosphere to surround the recruits with, and they seem to always enjoy that. And being able to have that be part of the visit and kind of give them a chance to talk to the coaches and learn more about the coaches and just more about the whole university. So the basketball games have always been some of the best recruiting reactions, and that one specifically was a great one. The recruits were all really impressed with how loud it was in the Breslin Center that day as Michigan State defeated Illinois. So yeah, that was interesting, and that's always fun to get their reactions to that. And one of the recruits that was on campus, Joshua Pittman, Chad Wilt visited today or yesterday morning out in Virginia. Mm-hmm. Michigan State was one of the first offers for him, as his recruitment's picked up a bit now, and he's already talking about scheduling an official visit to Michigan State in the summer. So that junior day definitely made a good impression on him. Sure.
Joshua Pittman, 6'3", 220, kind of an edge rusher, Suffolk, Virginia, King Fork High School, 3-star, ranked number 669 in the country, number 10 in Virginia. Like Jason said, visited Michigan State Junior Day January 19th, has offers from North Carolina, Virginia Tech, West Virginia, Duke, Syracuse. Michigan State right in the middle of it. Chad Wilt is busy on the recruiting trail, touching base with a lot of interesting rush and prospects all over the Midwest and outside of the Midwest, as a matter of fact. All right, Jason, I really appreciate your time. We'll let you go. Continued good work over at SpartanMag.com. We love your work. We appreciate you coming on the show. Thanks a lot, man.
Thanks.
All right, there goes Jason. Appreciate it, man. There goes Jason Killop. Great to hear from him. So the phone worked with Jason, didn't work with Nils. I'm not sure what happened with Nils, but worked with Jason. It's good to hear from him. Question number 10, back to the mailbag. Greff in from Livonia, Michigan says, Michigan State will have an offensive line in 2025 that will give our quarterback time and let us run. I don't know if that's a question. Did I type this in wrong? Oh, he says, will we? Will Michigan State have an offensive line in 2025 that will give Michigan State's quarterback time to run, time to throw, and room to run on the ground? That's a question. My answer is, I don't know. I don't know. And if so, Michigan State will win at least 7 games. And as far as the offensive line, we will begin to know more in the spring. We'll see how it all pieces together there. You're going to see, I think, Stanton Ramil, I think, at left tackle. I think Connor Moore at right tackle. He'll be competing there with Ashton Lepo. Luca Vinci from Oregon State. I like his film. I think he's going to be a nice addition. I'm kind of projecting him to be left guard. Matt Gulbin from Wake Forest, center. I've not watched his film yet. I got to check it out. Right guard, maybe it could be Big Dooley Phillips, could be Brocious. Rakeem Johnson's around. And then the guy from Western Carolina, I can't think of his name right now. I apologize. But he'll be in there somewhere also. But there's going to be competition, and I think there's some able bodies. A second year in Mahalchik's program, I think there's some possibilities there. So you're asking me, will Michigan State have an offensive line that'll give Childs time to throw and the running backs room to run? My answer is I don't know. But they've got a better chance to do it this year than they had last year. Question 11. Jalike from Berkeley, Michigan says, hey, Jim, I know in Big Ten play, he says, three-point shooting is better for Michigan State, but still not great. He says, I'm optimistic that at some point there will be a noticeable improvement. 1, what is the likelihood of improvement? And what is the ceiling, he asks. 2, how far can this team go if what we see now is what we get the rest of the way? Last week I said Sweet 16. And now, earlier in this show, you're asking if what we see right now is what we get all year. What's the ceiling? If what we're getting right now, I would still say Sweet 16. When I say Elite 8, I'm kind of projecting that Holloman will become more consistent as a three-point shooter. He was good last night, but he's kind of a streak guy. But I see that guy getting a little thicker, and I see him getting more confident. And when he shoots it, he thinks it's going in. That's not a bad thing. Akins, there's still some stiffness there and some confident situations. Need him to be a 40% three-point shooter in order to get to get past the Sweet 16. I used to always call it the Sweet 16 and beyond. When Michigan State was really rolling, and they're rolling this year, what you need to do to get to the Sweet 16 and beyond. Beyond is like that plus area, that elite area. The Elite 8, that's elite. Final Four is great, right? Sweet 16, Michigan State, Izzo's been there 15 gall darn times. 15 times to the Sweet 16. That's like Dean Smith territory. That's crazy. Krzyzewski almost. This team can get to the Sweet 16 and beyond. In order to get beyond, you need some shooters, whether it be the stretch four. Fears last night didn't look as good taking that shot. He's been better percentage-wise than I expected coming into, for the first 20 games of the season. Last night didn't look as good, but that can come back. Holloman, Richardson's been better. What was Richardson? 3 out of 4 from the three-point range against Rutgers. So it's by committee a little bit, but you'd rather have, Morris Peterson and A.J. Granger just knocking them down, right? Charlie Bell became a good shooter as time went on. So what they are right now, I think, is Sweet 16 material. If those guys shoot consistently on that given night in a regional semifinal, yeah, they can give someone trouble and win that one and get to the Elite 8. And if they shoot well there in the one-day prep, Izzo's specialty, possible. Another Final Four, possible. Question 12, Tom from Asheville, North Carolina, he says, besides Jack Ebling, who were 2 or 3 of the best Michigan State beat writers? Who were, he says. Jim, you can use your definition of best. He says, follow-up question, who cheers for Michigan in the press box that would surprise us? Not the obvious blue wall names. I realize this would have to be answered delicately. Who cheers for Michigan in the press box? Can't really tell. There's no cheering in the press box. You'll see people that are, you can just tell body language. It happens, but I don't know. No, you don't see a lot of that. Most people keep it inside. Other writers, I think Graham Couch does a good job. He writes some good features, some good columns. He had a really good feature about Jace Richardson a couple weeks ago. And he's an excellent writer, tells good stories. And he's a good technician. Good news judgment. And he's a good technician, and he keeps it, he's not overly wordy like some of us get. So Couch is solid, good. All of them are good, man. Chris Solari's good, very knowledgeable, good on the radio, knows baseball, knows football, basketball, hockey, pros, college. I think he would have been a good columnist. He could be a good columnist today, but even way back when columnists really ruled the world, I think Solari would have been really good back then. In that era, he's good right now for sure. Does a good job with the hard news too. Matt Wenzel at MLive does a really good job. Old school reporter, good job with the hard news for MLive for sure. Connor Eargood's coming around. I hope I pronounced that right. Detroit News, strong news background. Like his personality, kind person. That's always good. These guys, we're at SpartanMag.com. We are, we really focus on Michigan State football, basketball, recruiting, player development, message board, all those things. In terms of just pure journalism, I would encourage you guys to subscribe to a newspaper, pick a newspaper and subscribe to it. Stephen Brooks does a good job, man. Good writer. Good, solid, respectful writer. Does a good job. But, some of my favorites, Michigan State beat writers, Jack was good for a lot of years. Still very good with his podcast and everything. And I watched him when I was really young. And a lot of what I do, I've picked up on him and I've followed what he does. For instance, I remember the first time I went to Big Ten pre-season media days in Chicago. I didn't know what that was all about. I was at the State News. It was 1988, the year after the Rose Bowl. What are you supposed to do here? I see Ebling. Ebling sat down right next to Perlis for the entire thing. And I kind of roamed around. It was my first time. And man, there's a lot of interesting people there. As a teenager at the time, I think, and you're in a room with, I don't know, Hayden Fry and Schembechler and Earl Bruce and a lot of it was eye opening, right? There's Ebling's right there with Perlis. It's the next year, and in years in the future, that's what I started to do. I'd sit right next to Perlis or then Saban, even though Saban got on his nerves and everything. But a lot of what Ebling did, I watched and emulated, tried to, because he was good, man. And Ebling really knows X's and O's. So that was that made an impression on me about the importance of knowing X's and O's. Good storyteller too. You know, some of the people that didn't, that covered other sports, Detroit News, Free Press. I used to love those newspapers, and I still do. But back when the newspapers were really strong, when there was no internet and there weren't as many talk shows and no podcasts, the sports pages really drove the narrative on what sports fans had in terms of intake and then their opinions. And man, those columnists had a lot of power. Those guys were stars. Mitch Albom, Joe Falls, Charlie Vincent, George Puskas, Lynn Henning. And then, Wojnarowski is a good writer. And he's entertaining and he's fun with his podcast and stuff. He rankles Michigan State fans here and there, and he did a lot of that earlier in his career, but he knows his sports and he likes sports. A lot of times sports writers act like that they don't like sports. That doesn't, to each his own, but to me, I'm like, man, you know what? I like my sports writers to enjoy the sports they're covering. Wojnarowski does, and that's good. Drew Sharp was good. I really miss him and enjoyed him as a person. He was cantankerous, but he was fair, and he was fun to be around. I miss him. The columnists today are good. Seidel's good. Sean Windsor's really good. They're all good. John over at Detroit News is great. Beat writers, Dave Burkett for the Free Press, Detroit Lions, great one. And he wrote for Spartan Magazine years ago when he was still at Michigan State. I knew Dave really well back then. Haven't crossed paths with him much in the last 20 years because he's covering NFL, I'm covering colleges. But Burkett, not surprised that he's become a heavyweight there in Detroit, doing a good job. I like the Tigers, so Cody Stavenhagen for the Athletic does a good job with the Tigers, and with the Red Wings, I find myself getting drawn to the podcasts a little bit there. In terms of other writers, here at On3, I think Andy Staples is really good with his perspective. I mean, he was a walk-on at Florida, offensive lineman, so he knows college football inside and out. He knows offensive line play. He knows strength, weight room, all those things that a lot of us don't. And he's a good writer, and he's a quick reporter, quick with his writing, and he's accurate, and he's great as an enterprise reporter, digging deep and knows the dynamics, the cause and effect dynamics on the field, off the field. I listen to his podcast, and when he says something, I listen. Can learn something from him. He's really well-rounded. As far as Michigan State over the years, Dave Dye did a good job years ago. Terry Cabell, Detroit News years ago. Drew Sharp was good when he's a beat writer for the Free Press. Perry Farrell for the Free Press years ago. Now he's a high school guy. Pat Caputo at the Oakland Press, really well-rounded. He went to Michigan State. He knew the Michigan State history and the rosters, football, basketball. Knows the Tigers. He's covered Lakeland a number of times. He covered the Lions a little bit with the Oakland Press. He's very well-rounded, very knowledgeable, top to bottom, including Michigan State, and that comes out in when he does his talk show stuff in Detroit. He's great. Keith Langlois, when he was at the Oakland Press, did a good job with basketball. I mean, he knew Michigan State basketball. Dean Howe, when he was at the Flint Journal, really knew Michigan State basketball during the glory years of the Flintstones and so forth. Steve Grinzel did a good job with newspapers, which was the forerunner to MLive years ago. Good, solid, really respected reporter, newsman. Those are the good old days. Tribune, even the Chicago Tribune had a guy that would, gosh, what was his name? And I was really friendly with him. I can't think of his name right now. Italian guy, good guy. And I ran into him out in Arizona a couple years ago. He was doing some public relations out there when Michigan State was playing in the NCAA tournament. I was surprised to see him. Andrew Bagnato was his name. Andrew Bagnato, good reporter, Chicago Tribune. Back then the Tribune used to, he would come to Michigan State maybe once a month, maybe more than that if the football team was winning. And you don't see as much of that anymore at all. Tribune, they don't come around. Everybody has to scale backwards. But back in the old days, the glory years of newspapers in the 80s and 90s, glory years in terms of my frame of reference. I mean, I'm sure there were the true glory years, some people would say, was the 1920s. Back then, sports writers were covering events that were not on TV. So readers across the country had to rely on writers who saw it once and wrote about it, like the called shot, Wrigley Field, 1932, Babe Ruth. The writers all got together and agreed that what they saw is what they saw, and they wrote it. the better the story, the better newspapers would sell. So who knows if that actually happened. I mean, when I cover sports now, man, I feel kind of worthless without getting another look at it on a replay. Hockey's very difficult to see the first time. I can't do it. I need to see the replay. How they covered hockey back in the old days, I don't know. But, back then, some of those columnists, the sports columnists were picked up as syndicated sports columnists all over the country. Man, they had a lot of power. I don't know if power is the right word. They had a lot of scope. I mean, they had an impact on who became famous. They decide Red Grange is going to be famous. He became famous. Good football player, really good, right? Was he? He was good. Was he that good? 100 years later, statues and everything. He was good. He stood out, right? But, I don't know. It was good times. Now we got the internet, which is good, but I miss, newspapers are still good. But, man, those sports sections back in the 80s and 90s. I mean, every day I'd pick up a newspaper. It was like Christmas morning. It was like you're unwrapping a present. What's Mitch Albom writing today? What's Joe Falls going to write today? Am I going to agree, disagree? What's going on? It was cool. Anyway, I think that's about all we've got for today. We're going to go ahead and wrap up. We appreciate everybody checking us out. Let me go over here and check out the comment section. And by the way, thank you to that was Tom in Asheville, North Carolina, who had that question. And I used to like to go to different cities. When you're passing through a city, pick up the local newspaper and see who the local writer is and what they're writing about. And that was always fun, whether you're going through Chicago or Indianapolis or Lexington or anywhere down I-75 or out toward Iowa City. And there were some good beat writers around the Big Ten back in those years. And you wouldn't get it on the internet. There was no internet, so you had to actually go and pick up the newspaper. And there would be writers that might be famous, in Grand Rapids or Flint, that people in Detroit had no idea who they were. And vice versa. I remember coming to Michigan State in the 80s, and I love newspapers and everything. And I was just like, I'd walk down Grand River Avenue, and I was like, whoa, look, there's a Chicago Tribune box here. You remember when you used to buy newspapers out of the little vending machine boxes? There's a Chicago Tribune box here in East Lansing. How cool is this? Look at this thing. It's blue. I'd never seen a Chicago Tribune before. Bernie Lincecum was one of the writers. He was good. He was clever. I remember going to the MSU library and with a friend of mine, we were soccer fans back then. It was hard to find soccer fans back then. There weren't many. Go to the MSU library and pick up like the London Daily Mail and read like from last month's FA Cup games. And there were some clever writers there too. Anyway, internet has made some things good and it's made some things not as good. I'm thankful for the internet. Without that, we wouldn't be having this, and SpartanMag wouldn't be what it is. But what it's done a little bit to television, the music industry, and news, it's some of it's worrisome. Anyway, let's see what we've got here in the comments area. Desert Sparty points out that Notre Dame might be losing their offensive line coach. I was not aware of that. All right, let me see what kind of comments we've got. Austin Wolf says he's late to the party. Jimmy K says it's good to have plenty of bigs. Austin Wolf says Saudi Washington's been huge. Wait a minute. Austin Wolf says players are developing more than new assistants or shift in roles has to have played a part in it. I think there's better leadership. Last year, you can see what was going on with somebody. It just kind of sucked some of the oxygen out of things, and now there's plenty of oxygen, which has been good. Saudi has been good for the bigs. Zapawa has gotten better since the summer. He's gotten stronger. He's gotten bigger, and the fluidity and the touch that he has has been a bigger impact than I expected. Whitey Sparty says, is it just me, or does it seem like they have 10 assistant coaches behind the bench? Was that a thing before? I think it's about the same. John Borovich does a really good job with some things. A lot of things. Inbound plays. He has the scout sometimes on some teams. And, a lot of the play calls and so forth. He's not the one totally in charge of it, but he's handling a lot of the communication. He's a plus as an assistant coach. And I think a future head coach somewhere someday. Maybe at Michigan State down the road. Austin Wolf, the comment about, we were talking about Rossi and Smith visiting Trevin Pendleton in Ironton, Ohio earlier today. Austin Wolf with some comments that YD Sparty says, I thought our recruiting class would be moving up, but it's still around 50. Yeah, and recruiting rankings, that's going to be strange going forward. You look at Louisville, they've got a good football program. They went to the portal this year. You look to see where Louisville's recruiting rankings are right now. You still need a combination of both. But the old theorems that I used to say about you have to have a recruiting class between 25 and 45, I still believe that. But it's different now with the portal. If you could do damage in the portal like Arizona State did, like Indiana did. Although Tom Allen had a couple of good recruiting classes 2 or 3 years ago. So it's not, the portal has really changed what you can ascertain from recruiting rankings in terms of trying to extrapolate those forward, because now the portal's part of it too. So if you have a recruiting class that's ranked number 48, it's not great, but you can still make it work. I'm guessing Michigan State's good. Just looking at the groundwork right now, if Michigan State has a recruiting class that's at least 18 players next year, I'm not sure what it's going to be. I would expect Michigan State's class to be in the top 35 coming up this year. Could be better, don't know, but it's a hard apples to apples thing. Back when recruiting was everything, you could really say, okay, this team's got the number 7 recruiting class in the country. This team has number 47. And most coaches around the country would say, yeah, I'd rather have the number 7 class. I think all of them probably would. Doesn't mean they're going to develop well and hang together and you're going to have classes stacked around it. But now with the portal in there, if you've got a team that's got the number 16 recruiting class and one team's got the number 40 recruiting class, that would have meant something years ago. Now you see that and you're like, okay, well, what did they do in the portal? And it might blur it back. I don't know. JJ McCase is excited for spring football. All right, I think we're about ready to wrap it up. But I appreciate everybody, all the comments and so forth. Just looking for some other, just a lot of conversations amongst yourselves. Ben Rivera says Booker needs to be more aggressive. Question about Bryson Williams. Yeah, I think he's still committed. I got to look into that. I got to check in on that. I agree on Braylon Collier, wide receiver from Sandusky, Ohio. I think that was a good find right there. And I was going to ask Jason something else about what they said about James Adams. Aiden West was really excited about James Adams coming in as safeties coach. Adams did a good job recruiting Aiden West for Wake Forest. West ended up committing to Michigan State, and West was really fired up when Michigan State hired James Adams. James Adams is going to be, I think he's going to do a real good job at Michigan State. All right, I'm just going to go ahead and sign off. We got some interesting. Glad to hear from Chris Martinez saying he misses the print edition of SpartanMag. Appreciate that. Yeah, Macomb Daily. See, that's a newspaper that I heard a lot of good things about, especially their high school coverage, but I never really saw it. But it had a really good reputation back in the old days. It may still. I don't want to say it doesn't anymore. This is true. Michigan offers becomes a 4-star. All right, guys, I'm going to sign off. I appreciate everybody coming in and playing along. Appreciate all the support, everybody the support we get at SpartanMag.com, SpartanMag subscribers. Go over there and become a SpartanMag subscriber if you're not already. We'd love to have you over there. And appreciate having Jason Killop on. We'll try to get Nils in next time. I'm not sure what happened, but the phone didn't come through. It worked for Jason, so maybe it's Nils' problem. Anyway, appreciate everybody having a good day. Have a good week. Take care of each other. We see you next time. Go over to SpartanMag.com. We'll check you out over there. Peace out, everybody.